Perfect. Excellent. Sorry for that false start. I thought I was all prepared, but there we go. So yeah, this is to introduce myself. My name's Anton Barnwell. I'm currently in the middle of being a trainee and qualifying. I've finished my 3rd year. I'm just waiting for the exam board to sit. So I don't know what I am at the moment. But yeah, trainee clinical psychologist from the University of Surrey. And I'm here to talk to you about university students' experiences of digital mental health packages, which includes computerized CBT and other things too. So, tell you a bit more about myself. This is important in terms of how I approach the research. So I'm an English white man, heterosexual, cisgendered, neurotypical. I have my own lived experience of mental health problems from part of my upbringing. Worked through that a lot to get to this part of my career. I have varied experiences with universities. I've worked in some, I've studied at a few. The reason why I share this with you is because this is all important. These are my frames of reference from how I then approach this topic and I approach this research. And it's important that I share this with you as the interpretive nature of my work. All these factors will contribute. Okay. So why was I interested in looking at university mental health in the first place? So you guys may know this already, you may not. Apologies if this is things you already know. Mental health for university students is very, very big. Lots of students have negative experiences of studying. Lots of students feel lonely when they're studying. This is BBC articles from this year that came out. And it was quite striking that university students, particularly from marginalised or oppressed backgrounds, feel even more lonelier than other students. So there's a real big problem with universities and with students who are studying. And to further that point, there's just some further stats here really. Studying is stressful. There's now more students than ever before, and 1 in 5 will experience some form of mental illness while studying, and that is within a context of relatively low levels of help seeking compared to people of similar ages who are not university students. Wellbeing service referrals at universities has increased by 500% in the last 12 years. The suicide rate, sadly, has also increased a lot since the turn of the century. And what we know about university is that it can be a kind of fork in the road. So people who graduate and go on to earn higher earnings, they have reduced risk of sort of having years impacted by disability or mental health, and so on and so forth. But actually, the university wellbeing services themselves within different universities vary greatly. So within this context, across the country, across the UK, the wellbeing provisions at individual universities is very, very different. So in terms of university mental health support, there are often university wellbeing centres that offer different types of support. So some is one-to-one counselling, there may be some group work, there may be neither. There may be lots of resources pumped in, there may be hardly any resources pumped in. But one of the emerging things coming into the context is computerized CBT. Again, I don't know if anyone has heard of computerized CBT before. I have no idea. But here is a 1-minute, just quick summary on what I mean by computerized CBT. And let me know if you cannot hear this. In fact, you probably won't be able to hear this, so bear with me. I'm just going to share, because I don't think I enabled sound. Oh no. Okay, bear with me. There we go, that's what I want. Sharing. Okay.
I was on if it doesn't work.
There we go. Include computer sound. Let's try that again.
Many of us suffer from problems that affect our mental health, and taking a step to a healthier mind can be difficult. To help us with that challenge, we've spent over 15 years researching and building Silver Cloud, designed by clinical experts using proven methods for helping people, all with the aim of empowering you to think and feel better. The result is an online space that's secure, anonymous and supportive, that offers easy-to-use interactive programs with interesting tools, tactics, and human support elements. Our programs are tailored to your needs, helping you to learn new skills to approach the challenges you're facing. Silver Cloud is designed to be flexible, fit in with your schedule, and be accessible whenever, wherever suits. Sign up today.
Signing up today is optional, by the way. And just to say, yeah, CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy. So computerized CBT is one of the online digital platforms that universities are increasingly having within their wellbeing provisions that they offer to all students, kind of as a population level intervention. Another type is what I will call digital peer support, and platforms such as Togetherall. This used to be called Big White Wall. So if anyone has come across that before, I'll give you just 1 minute as well to hear about Togetherall.
A safe place to talk, share, and support others like you, moderated by professionals 24/7. Everybody is safe. We don't use real names, and we take your anonymity seriously. Once in, you can use a range of tools and services. Connect with others who are experiencing similar thoughts and feelings. Express yourself creatively by posting a brick. Keep track of thoughts and feelings in your very own journal. Identify and work towards your goals. Understand what you're experiencing and track your progress. Take part in an online course where you can chat with others and share tips on what's working. And when you need a bit more support, our clinically managed and registered wall guides are just a click away. So join today to get support, take control, and feel better.
Okay, again, that's I'm not endorsing this, but yes, that's Togetherall. So you may have picked up some similarities in language there. They both have assumptions are very similar. So they both contain elements of CBT in terms of thoughts, feelings, behaviours. But digital peer support of Togetherall tends to include more sort of community spaces where you can link in with other students, whereas Silver Cloud, that is also an option in Silver Cloud, but it tends to be more the individual courses as well. So essentially, these are the two conceptualizations that form in the umbrella of digital mental health packages, but there is a lot of overlap. Even more so when considering that universities can pay for these two, Silver Cloud or Togetherall, with different things added on or taken away. So this is a great big umbrella really of digital mental health packages. And this is really where my research comes in. And so lots of universities now have these within their universities, but there's not a lot of evidence. So, and the evidence that is out there is a bit dated, and it focuses more on quantitative factors. So looking at efficacy, looking at whether it, changes depression scores, etc. And there's really not much of that either. So my focus was more qualitatively. What's it like to use these packages while studying? Okay. I'm not sure how I'm doing for time, so I will breeze through this quite quickly, but I used a qualitative thematic analysis, and essentially 11 participants took part from a variety of different backgrounds. And really what I was focusing on is trying to capture the essence of the person's experience. So this is a bit more about the reflexive thematic analysis approach. I'm going to just quickly skip through that, but feel free to ask questions if you'd like to. And what I focused on really was about trying to capture the whole journey of participants, their experiences when they first heard about these packages, what it was like, what kept them using it, what made them stop if they had stopped, and trying to really capture that. So from that process, 6 themes were generated, and it is generated, not emerging themes. They are generated by me and my different identities and how I interpret the world with the data. So that's a really important part here. I'm not telling you the truth. I'm telling you how I interpreted my interaction with the data. And these are the 6 themes. So first up, signposted to self-reliance. So students were saying, and what I was hearing was that having sought out support and going to see a staff member at a university, it often was a university staff member as well, they felt like they were being kind of pushed and signposted to use this package on their own. So these quotes here kind of illustrated that to me. And essentially there were some questions here about people not really feeling like they were given the instructions and tools and resources with clarity enough for them to use it on their own. I think this is kind of captured here in the top quote. I just didn't probably use it in the way you were meant to use it. I don't know. But I also don't know if kind of it was ever explained to me how to use it. And that kind of focus on self-guidance and doing so autonomously was really highlighted by the second quote as well. This participant highlighting because of their mental health, they were quite fatigued. They weren't really energized to do things. So next up, it'd be nice to talk to someone. So participants really liked the fact that there's conversational elements within these packages. So you can put a message, it's replied to. You can strike up a forum, you can post a brick somewhere and have it responded to. But actually the communication was also impacted by the familiar things that happen in online communication. So not being able to understand tone or depth or the kind of timing and flow of normal conversations. So people might be talking about something and it gets missed quite a lot, or the emotions were not kind of validated or responded to, or sometimes the message wasn't physically responded to at all, or it took a few days to come back. And this really was put in the sub-themes of miscommunication and also missed communication. So there were things that were missed and things that were kind of longed for in terms of having that kind of connection and space to really connect with another human being. Okay, third up, it's a community, but not a true community. This is a really important one for me. This is something that really stands out in the sense of particularly the online peer support spaces, where a student is essentially being sent to things like Togetherall to connect with like-minded people, peer support essentially. But it didn't quite feel that way. And I think this top quote really illustrates that. So it lacks that true sense of community because you're never going to truly interact with these people. It will always be a fleeting moment in time. And this really highlights to me I'll come on to it actually in the discussion section. I won't reveal all now. And also there are parts of the social comparison in terms of being with other people. So some people found that quite normalizing, seeing someone else in the same boat as you. Going through the same things. Some students found that was quite helpful actually and helped normalize their experiences, but others felt like it kind of added to their workload, particularly when there was elements of comparison being brought in. I've got this assignment and I've got this extra thing to do. Suddenly someone felt quite shamed that they were kind of in distress as well. And also within this community of peer support, some students were saying things to me like this bottom right quote about, I don't think I could help anyone if I'm not feeling all right in the head. So am I giving out good advice anyway? So really questioning about the person's role in this group and whether they are actually in the right place to be helping other people when they themselves are wanting and seeking help themselves. Okay, the fourth theme, easy in, easy out. So if anyone's done any research or looked into any kind of things about the benefits of computerized basically anything, this is what this theme is really speaking to in parts anyway. Really easy to use, really accessible, quick access. So it's really, really good at that. If you want some help immediately, you can just log in, sign up, takes a few seconds and boom, you're there. But actually the kind of easy out as well is the other side of that. It's quite easy for participants to drop out and stop using these things. Now, for some people, that was a decision because they were quite happy with what they were getting and they were safe in the knowledge that they could return. So it was kind of a dropping out or stopping using the service, but it was, I guess, a happy decision or maybe a more content decision. But for others, they kind of felt very much like this wasn't what was right for them as an intervention. And this bottom quote really is about who is it easy for? Who are these packages easy for? So this participant was telling me that they felt like they were being given a pacifier, as if they were as if you were trying to quieten the baby. So that really to me brought up an image of this great big institution of university giving a pacifier to a crying child. It really brings up the idea of university students being in between childhood and adulthood in terms of typical ages of students, 18 to 25 maybe. and that andragogic and pedagogic experience of child-based learning and adult-based learning. It really kind of sits somewhere in the middle of that. So yeah, who are these things easy for? And again, some students built on this by saying that they felt quite forced into using these packages. They didn't want to use these, they would much rather have something different, but this is what they felt they had to do to get the help they wanted. Okay, I felt like I was doing another university course, is the fifth theme. Essentially, this is talking about students seeing lots of similarities, they're learning. And this was also during COVID, by the way, to remind everyone of that, during the time when lots of interactions were happening online anyway. So for some students, they found this really, really helpful. They were already learning online. This is just something else. But others felt like it was just adding more things for them to learn. And this middle quote really highlights that. If someone my age sees skills, they're just like, oh God, not another uni course, please, not another. And there was real desperation in that tone. And yeah, and this kind of linked in as well with these being signposted to doing things on their own. There was a lot of information, but actually quite limited clarity in what information, what course to seek, what information was relevant for that person. And this is really speaking about the importance of what we call a kind of formulation, of knowing exactly what that person wants and knowing and kind of tailoring your approach to meet that person. That was kind of missing. And then last up, it's a safe space. So these packages work really hard to try and sort of promote this sense of safety. And the general impression was that these platforms were safe. But the anonymity, which brought that safety and the freedom for people to be themselves, had the other end of that sword, if you will, about not knowing who's reading and who is reading what you're writing, or not knowing who's written what is being advised as well. So although these things were mostly based on CBT, there was no kind of accountability or this is the person that's written this. It's a very two-dimensional space, which some students found quite disconcerting, and they were not willing to be as open as they wanted. Yeah, so it's a safe space, but there are elements of things that perhaps were not that safe. And in terms of containment, this was a really interesting one. So this really depends on how staff monitor the space. So for some people, they were able to share quite distressing things, and staff would kind of monitor and kind of validate, and it felt very contained and kind of held. But other times, participants told me they would see somebody else in distress and see that no one was helping them. And this was quite distressing for themselves as well to see. All right, we're coming to the end of my time. So what does this all mean? This is a lot of information that I've chucked at you guys. I have no idea what your kind of context is and how close you are to this topic. But if I want to leave you with anything, it's this slide here, really. These packages have a wealth of information, but there tends to be a lack of guidance in terms of how they are implemented and how participants are told to use them, which means it's quite a confusing space for students to be, particularly the word. I can only speak to the students that I spoke to. Obviously, it's the caveat of any qualitative piece of work, but this is a really, really important point. In terms of forcing students into the role, particularly of a peer supporter role or a helper role, there's a real question here about epistemic injustice. And what that means is denying somebody access to help that they want when you could give it to them. So an example here was a number of students that told me that they wanted to have help, but they found themselves having to help other people instead. So they were not getting the help they wanted, but instead they were defaulted into the role of being a helper. And is this something that we kind of want to do with any kind of mental health intervention, really? There were questions around why some students' experiences were normalized and others were re-traumatized by reading distress. This is a really, really key thing if we think about population-based intervention. Why does this happen, and how can we detect if someone is appropriate for this type of intervention or not? Is relying on autonomy wise when we know that depression and anxiety, some of the most common mental health problems, drain motivation, drain creativity, drain that kind of drive to get up and go? How wise is it to rely on this? And also, how do young adults and students typically learn? Do they need a little bit more guidance from staff members at this stage of their life? And the bottom four is about anonymity and that function of what does it give, what does it take away? How can we find ways to connect. One participant told me a really lovely quote about us as humans having many Venn diagrams sort of coming up of us, many parts of us that others can see and latch onto. So, you know, I'm Anton, you're seeing me, I'm a white male, I've shared some things with you, but you can't see that behind me I've got a load of football stuff. You can't see that, I'm not willingly showing you that, but it's there. If you came around into my physical space, you might see some of this stuff, some books I've got, some other random stuff. So there are lots of latches to connect with people in the personal world, but online, when you're anonymous, it makes that bit harder. So there's a real question there about how we do that. The last 3 points, attachment. So I mentioned to you some students were returning, coming to and fro and returning to the computerized package and then going away and then coming back and then going away. Is this attachment? Is this secure attachment? There is some research that suggests that human beings can attach to non-human things or non-alive things, particularly when they're lonely. And I want to highlight that. So when we go back to the start, we know that students tend to be a bit lonelier than other people, particularly in the current day and age. How do we feel about that? How do we feel about highlighting and sending students to a connection with someone that isn't real? And there were some questions from and some statements from participants that I spoke to saying, I wasn't sure if I was speaking to a computer. I felt like this was a robot. So there's some elements here again about that kind of ethical practice. LinkedIn again, the online space and the offline space. How does this translate into the real world? I'll highlight you back to the quote from the participant saying that none of this is kind of happening. You're never going to meet these people. And how does that support then translate? How does peer support translate when you know on some level you're never going to meet these people? And particularly lastly for students, the population of students changes every 3 years when people finish their course. So when creating a peer support space, it's about having consistent spaces to create a culture of norms, of rules, of openness, of sharing, relating to each other. And when you have a complete population shift every 3 years, it really raises the question of how to do this. And I make some suggestions in my research about how, in terms of offering students paid roles, and including students within their sort of post-qualification life to maybe form part of the support around these packages, but also to include students within the design of wellbeing services beyond computerized packages as well. And that's everything. Oh my God, I can't see anyone's faces, so I'm just picturing like all of you just staring blankly at me. I've just lost all of you. So I would really love to just, yeah,